This is Yuli Gonzalez, and she's going to do a presentation. And I think that MIT students already had some. You're going to hear a little bit more, a little bit different. The undergrads have not heard any of this. And I think it opens up our minds just a little bit to what's happening in the rest of the world. Because sometimes we become very ethnocentric in our world and think, oh, everybody must be doing this. This is the way school is. This is the way classrooms run. And it's not like that. So what I was telling Yuli, this is a perfect segue into our next unit, which is on, well, maybe not a unit, but our next few lessons on culturally responsive engagement. So producing lessons, we know how to do that. You know how to do assessments from assessment. We know how to manage classroom. So now, how do we engage when not everybody is exactly like us? And can we assume everybody is exactly like us? Of course not. So that's our next steps. So this works out perfect. She had said last week that she wanted to come in. I'm like, oh yeah, and I just picked Monday, and I'm like, oh, worked out perfect. Yeah. Monday it is. So this is Yuli. So we should be up and running here. Okay.
So for the ones that already know me, I will be presenting the same thing already, but I have structured better the presentation, so maybe you will find it different someday. So good afternoon. My name is Julie Gonzalez. I'm from Colombia. I'm a Fulbright visitor scholar. I've been here in Winona for about 2 months, and I'm leaving in 15 days, so I didn't want to miss the chance to meet you all. Okay. So before sharing with you why I am in St. Mary's, I want to tell you a little bit about me and the reason why I am here. So I am from Bogota. I was born in the capital of Colombia. I was born and raised in the capital of Colombia. This is a city with around 7 million people. And it is divided into neighborhoods according to the social economic classes. It is like important to mention that because you will see later how is that connected to my teaching practice. I'm ready for the winter. This is not my first time in Minnesota. I came to Eden Prairie. I don't know if you know what is Eden Prairie. I came to Eden Prairie 12 years ago. That was my first experience abroad. And that time I was not working. I was a Spanish assistant teacher in a bilingual school. So I'm ready for the winter. Um, I'm a teacher in elementary and secondary. So this is how my classroom looks like, and that's me in practice. So I teach now, well, not now, so I used to teach English in elementary, and I taught English and Spanish in secondary. In elementary, we usually don't have, I don't know if I mentioned that I work for a public school. But I work for a public school in Colombia, and the conception of public school is kind of different from here because in Colombia, the students who attend to a public school are the one that comes from low or medium classroom families. And they are usually located in very vulnerable contexts. So I work for a public school, and the reason why I am teaching English in a public school is because we have a project. But in general, in Colombia, we don't have teachers of English for elementary or preschool. In my school is a very strange school. We just try to do things differently. But in general, we don't have teachers of English. In my school, there are, of course, elementary teachers that are like this. Oh, I forgot to mention that I also have some kind of experiences in other parts of the world. So I used to teach Spanish in England, and I also have some kind of experience teaching in India. I have also been kind of a trainer of in-service elementary teachers, and that is because those teachers have to teach language, I mean English, without having any idea of the language. So that is the general thing that is happening in Colombia. English is a mandatory subject from first to 11th grade, but we don't have teachers, I mean, we don't have enough or sufficient teachers of English in the elementary levels. So those teachers are the ones who must teach us without knowing the language. So I just in the school where I work, I just see how the teachers confront and they struggle with teaching yeah English, and I started to conduct like a process to teach them somehow English language methodology. But there was just general ideas because we didn't have too much time, but at least to let them know that there are maybe some easy ways to teach English when you don't know the language, which is kind of weird. It's kind of strange, but yeah, at least to let them know that we can have like a team to support them. So that is the reason, and that is the basis of my research project that I'm going to share with you a little bit today. So you will say, by why St. Mary's? I study at La Salle University, that is the university in Bogota, enrolled the doctorate program in education and society in 2018, and one of the requirements of this program is to have an experience in an international university or national, but that experience is related to strengthen your abilities in research, and it is very wide. I mean, research is very open to many things. So it could be theoretical, methodological. They could be doing these kind of connections. So to me, United States was a good possibility due to the fact that most of the literature related to ESL, English Second Language, comes from here. I know the context and the conditions are different, but there are many things that are happening right now in terms of teaching language that could apply, or maybe that could somehow, yeah, apply to my research. So in 2020, I considered the possibility to apply to through Fulbright. I don't know if you know about Fulbright. Well, Fulbright offers different scholarships for you to, well, from foreigners to travel to the United States. And but you can also can apply through Fulbright when you pursue your doctoral or postdoctoral program to go to Colombia. So if sometimes you want to go there, you can go. Okay. So in 2020, I applied for a Fulbright scholarship, but at that time I didn't obtain the scholarship. So I applied again in 2020. I obtained the scholarship, and then I came here. I chose St. Mary's because I saw there were the program in education and the master program in ESL, in English Second Language. So that's why I came here to St. Mary's. One of the requirements to apply to Fulbright was to present an essay related to my research project. So that was the main part of that process, like just to link how my project was mm, good for the nation, for the country, and at the same time to see how can you connect that research project with the things that you will be doing here in the United States. So this is the title of my project: English methodology for the training of pre-service teachers in the context of teacher training colleges. That is the translation I found because that one is from French in Colombia. I will tell you a little bit about this. So in Colombia, if you want to be a teacher, you can go either to an university and you can spend there 5 years, or you can go to the teacher training colleges. So, but there is it's like a technical program. So you can, I'm working with these colleges, and in that kind of institution, it is a regular school. It's like a normal school, and in the same building, you can find preschool, elementary, secondary, upper secondary, and the training of teachers. It's in the same, sometimes it's in the same building. So they are studying, imagine that you are studying here and at the same time there are kids around. It's like that. That's how it works. So I'm working with that institutions. In Colombia, there are in total 137, and every year there are around 7,000 teachers graduated from those schools. So what can they do when they are taking the program? They They started teaching practice from the very beginning, I would say from the first week. But it is not only observing, but also making the class. They have to do the class. So they start, of course, with an observation, but they have to do the class in all subjects. Um, they have to conduct a research project during the 2 years, which is in most of the cases action research project. They have to do it. It is not just a project. They have to conduct the research. They study English methodology, but the time they spend with the language and studying the language methodology is not enough for them because they have to split between all the rest of the subjects and the practice they do. Once they graduate, they can teach in preschool and elementary, and they can also be rural directors. And they have to teach all subjects, including English. I mean, they have to be in the capacity to teach English, but they feel they don't have the capacity. And well, I will tell you a little bit. So this is like the long path regarding the national bilingual policy. I will not stop in all those programs, but I would just say that in general, in all the process, those kind of institutions are not being taken into account in the bilingual language policy. So at this time, we don't know what they are doing in terms of teaching English. And there are not studies according to that. So in general, I would say that English in the bilingual language policy is centered in English, in a hegemonic language. Although we have 65 indigenous languages in Colombia, but bilingualism is a kind of privilege. So if you speak both Spanish and English, you will be considered like a good person in terms of like work and access to education. But if you speak, let's say, Spanish and Quechua, which is a indigenous language, you will be a problem for the policy in education. So it's just to let you know how it works. English is a mandatory subject in elementary, secondary schools, colleges, and university, and it is due. Well, in the last year, we have some trades, commercial trades with other countries, and besides that, we receive some monetary help from other organizations. So we are kind of subordinate to their policies. So we have to conduct that. That is why English is mandatory. English is evaluated in national exams based on the levels of proficiency from the Common European Framework. I don't know if you are familiar with the Common European Framework. No? So there are like 6 levels. So it's A1, A2, which is like the basic level. So it's like you say, hello, my name is Julie. It's very basic. B1 and B2, which is intermediate, and C1 and C2, which is advanced. Mine is kind of B2. So C1 is more like a native one. C1 and C2. So when you graduate from the school, you are supposed to be in a B1 level of English, which is intermediate. But when you want to graduate when you want to obtain a professional degree, if you don't have the B2 level, you cannot graduate. I mean, you have to demonstrate through an international exam that you have the level. So it's like that. And in my case, that I'm conducting a doctorate program, we have to demonstrate as well that we have a B2 level. But just to give you an example, I don't know if I mentioned that in that session when I presented. I have one of my classmates. She is conducting a research with sign language, and she do it. I mean, I can say she speaks, but she knows sign language very well, and that is not taken into consideration. The only thing that is really important is that you are bilingual but in English, in a foreign language, which is kind of sad. There are inequity of conditions for learning English. There is a big gap between public and private schools. And this is because, well, I already mentioned that in public schools we don't have enough teachers of English in elementary, but also in private schools they do have teachers of English from preschool, and they have an intensity of hours. I would say that no less than 8 hours per week in public schools, we have just 1 hour per week. So, but we are measured with the same common European framework, you see? So that is one of the problems. And well, this is what I just mentioned before. In Colombia, we have this amount of teachers of English, and just 279 are in elementary and preschool. I'm just talking about the entire Colombia. This is nothing. And that compared, and you can see that most of them work in a urban area. And the teachers I'm working with, which are graduated from the normal schools, this is the amount that are already enrolled in public institutions. And as you can see, most of them, when they graduate, they work for rural contexts. Mhm. And I want you to keep in mind that rural work, because I will explain you a little bit more about how are rural conditions in Colombia. So English is attached to better job opportunities, as I already mentioned, higher income and social status. And in relation to the institutions, the normal schools or the training colleges, teacher training colleges, there are some strategies from the national bilingual policy, but they are just centered not in 10% of the schools. And none of the rural schools are taken into consideration. I mean, there are 137, and I think there are 6 rural schools that are not taken into consideration. So just 10 of them, which is, in the majority of cases, are the schools, the training schools that are in a city, in a urban zone. So that's. And there are, as I already mentioned, in relation to those institutions, there are not official documents that serve as a guide for the training in English methodology for these pre-service teachers. So we don't know what they are doing. The schools are autonomous when they teach those teachers English, but we don't know what they are doing. We know they have to conduct a practice in English. We know that they have to see English, but we don't know how many hours per week. If they see English every single semester, just one, we don't know it. Well, I know already because I have conducted that research. So that is my research about. So these are the rural conditions in Colombia. There is a lack of accessible roads. I don't know, have you ever been into South America? No? So the conception of rural is different from here. So if you want to access to some rural school, it could be difficult, very difficult. So I went to one of the rural schools, and it was kind of, yeah, it was a trip. It was an adventure. Yeah, so most of the teachers that work that graduate from those schools have to confront that kind of situations. There is difficulty accessing basic services such as health, education, and drinking water. And well, this is part of our history, but the rural context have been historically victims of armed conflict. So sometimes they are forced to move from the context to cities. So because of that conflict and illicit crops. I don't know if that word is well translated, illicit crops. So it is like, you know that Colombia has had some problems with cocaine and things like that, so does illicit crops. There are many things behind that, and it is most of the cases, no, in all cases related to violence. Okay, so that is the context where they have to work. So I just have that question. So how are future teachers being trained in English language methodology in the teacher training colleges? So that was one of the picture I took in one of the practice I observed that she was with preschool students, and doing that through these 3 lenses, which is language ideology. I mean, what they think about English. Sometimes they just refer to English as a way to obtain money, to have better status, for being able to go abroad, but they don't see like the process that they conduct with the kids. That is something that I have found in the data that I had collected. The other thing I will focus on is on classroom language practices. I observed some of the classes, 10 in total, and what I want to see is how do they understand English and how do they show that through the classes. And as they have to conduct a research project, I made a documentary revision of the research that the paper, research paper that they conducted related to EFL, English Foreign Language. So this is the methodology. This is a multiple case study. I just work with 5 schools. I wish I could work with more, but believe me, I have a lot of information. When you conduct a research, you will find out how difficult it is to do research. So I just did it with 5. I still collecting data with 7 4. I would say 7 6 pre-service teachers and 10 trainers or professors. These are the data collections. This is how I just split the techniques and instruments. So for the language ideology, I did individual interviews, group interview, that was kind of like this, and surveys. For classroom language practicing, I did 10, this is not like 10 observation, they were not participant, observation of the classes, and I did a documentary revision of 47 research papers. I want to mention that for the research papers, there is nothing online. I have to go to the libraries and to check all the books in all 5 schools. So right now I am working in the last category. So I'm systematizing that. But I already systematized that. I'm just finding the common categories in everything. Yeah, so that is what I'm doing right now. So it's kind of a long process. You have to be very organized with all the data that you got. This is this is the rural school that I visited. The one that I told you is kind of difficult to access, even though it is not that far from Bogota. It is like 3 4 hours far from Bogota. This is another school where I conducted an observation, and those are the teachers in one of the teacher training colleges. In a school I visited that is close to Bogota, is like half an hour far from Bogota. And the purpose of my visit is just to stand my teacher perspective. Of course, I wanted to share my project. I think this is a responsibility that we as researchers have with our research, just to share and let people know what is happening, to make people aware that not everything works as we think it is in our minds. So identify meaningful insights for my research, and that is what I have done in the classes. Maybe it is not that explicit because, for example, I have been attending to the master classes, and the readings and everything has been great for my research, and also the way as we just go to the reflections, so that it has been very very nice. And just make connections. I just want to make connections with you. And if you want to, if sometimes you want to go to Colombia, remember that La Salle University and St. Mary, they have a partnership, so maybe you can consider that in the future if you want to go and explore other ways to make education. So that's it. This is my information, and yeah. So thank you for your attention.
Julie, will you take some questions?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
So you used the term rural director at some point.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with our school system, but would that be like kind of like a superintendent, like someone who supervises the schools in a given geographic area? Or what is a rural director?
Like a principal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in the rural schools, I don't know why they don't call it principal. They call it rural school. But that is in Colombia. That is, but in general, principals in Colombia are called principals. But in rural school, they are called rural directors. Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of begs the question: is there really like that big of a culture difference in like urban and rural schools?
Yeah, it's very different. I think there are many aspects to consider, and like in Bogota, we have access to universities, to colleges, but in those kind of contexts, they don't have. So especially in the school where I visited, I would say that those institutions are the basic of education in that area. So they don't have any other possibility to access to any other ways to education. So if they don't study there, they don't have any other option. They will have to move to another city. and they have their proper, cultural perspective in relation to that. I would say that in one of the institutions, I found in the revision that I made of the paper research work, I found a research project related to other languages. Like, I found like 10, not only related to English, but to other languages. And I started reading the documents, and I found so many things, like, because they just center the knowledge from the perspective of uh, all people. So it's the other way to see knowledge. Sometimes um, education and in general policies do not attend to the people who already went through the process. So something that I found from the documentary revision is that in indigenous languages, like the perception of saviors is very important. So that is one thing. And in general, I think if you have the chance to go to Colombia, you will see like not the barriers, but the change between every single region. Like, it's very different. Yeah.
I have a question about the 2-year program.
Mhm.
That's only for elementary teachers? Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between going to a 5-year and going to that 2-year? Do they have pay differences or different
Yes.
places where they can
Uh-huh.
go?
Well, you can go if you want to be elementary or preschool teacher. You can go to that school, but you can also go to a university. The difference is yes that when you graduate, if you enroll the public sector, you will be paid more. That is the only difference. And the other thing is that if you work for a private school, well, sometimes in Colombia there are many private schools, and sometimes some of them are very small. They are located sometimes in houses, and they usually enroll those kind of teachers because they can be paid less. Yeah. So in terms of salary, it is different, but they can do like the same things that we do, but just with preschool and elementary. Mhm. Yeah. Do you have more questions? Or maybe if not, you just can have my email. You can just look it up, Julie Gonzalez, and we can talk a little bit more. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.